Travolting, covering the Thin Red Line. Enjoy the episode. I remember the days back when I was on the beach, when we took the hill, and then we defended the hill. And I think back on those, and the woman I left behind. And whether, at the end of the day, was it all worth it? What did we accomplish? Why was I there? Why were any of us there? All right, welcome, folks, to our episode on the Thin Red Line.
Not the intro I thought we were going to start with, but I was going to say, like, hey, Jeff, what color is that chair that you're sitting in right now?
The chair was red.
And
the room was blue. We were there, covering a John Travolta film. But I spent the whole time wondering, why? Why were we here? Why would we commit 33 episodes to John Travolta? What was I doing with my life? Could I never return to those quiet, sunlit days back in Pennsylvania? I would never know. But I was here now.
I don't even want to stop you. You're like, are we going to do the whole podcast like
What
this?
if we did the whole episode in monologue, Terrence Malick monologue?
So yeah, folks, we're covering The Thin Red Line, 1998, directed by Terrence Malick.
Yes.
Based on the James Jones novel.
Yes. The
Cracking open my Red Bull.
Yeah, he's cracking open the Red Bull, folks. That is not a beer.
Thin Red, well.
All the beers were drank by Jack before he moved out last week.
Oh, yeah. How are you feeling about that, by the way?
I'm still got to find a subletter. We're still working on it.
Bill Clinton didn't do it?
He's being non-committal. He's being non-committal is all I'm going to say.
If Bill Clinton has any problem with anything, being non-committal is definitely one of them.
Bill has commitment issues.
Yes, he does.
But anyway. Yeah, The Thin Red Line, the longest movie we've covered so far.
Is it really?
Yes, at nearly 3 hours.
Wow.
Also, one of the, if not the most acclaimed movies we've covered. It's up there among, films like Blowout and whatnot, and Pulp Fiction with universally strong reception.
But I'm not going to lie, though, I barely heard of this movie.
You really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, because I think, didn't this come out the same year, Saving Private Ryan?
Yes. Either the same year or the year after.
Yeah. I just remember, reading the reviews, and a lot of the reviews were saying, kind of similar takes, which is this movie suffers from being, analyzed right next to Saving Private Ryan. So I barely heard about this movie.
Yeah, okay, so both this and Saving Private Ryan were nominated for Best Picture at that year's Oscars, and they lost to Shakespeare in Love.
Oh, yeah. Who else was nominated that year?
It was Elizabeth and Life is Beautiful, the Roberto Benigni film.
That was a bad year, wasn't it?
I mean, some good movies.
Shakespeare in Love, though?
Yeah, it's a bit of a yikes.
Shakespeare in Love?
My guess as to what happened is...
Respect the troops, folks.
my take as to what happened is these two movies probably split the votes from each other, and Shakespeare in Love just slid through the middle. It was also, that was a Harvey Weinstein movie that he very heavily lobbied for to win. So it was a year where that, the stars just aligned for that to happen, and for neither of the two World War II films to win.
Yeah.
But two very different World War II movies.
Yes, very different.
One of them, I don't want to say hyper patriotic, because that's not what Saving Private Ryan is, but it's
right. I see where you're going with that point, but it is definitely, and it's also not glorifying war.
Yes,
but it is very much
it's more of
an American tale.
Yeah, it's an American tale about honoring the men who gave their lives for our freedom.
Yes.
Whereas this is a movie about kind of the futility of it. And
also sort of the near damnation of the types of people who or not, I don't even know if I want to say that. Just kind of what people turned into in this war.
It's a contemplative movie that's basically just trying to ask why is this happening and why are these people doing this? What is the point of any of it? And it comes to basically the answer of there is no point. And we gotta, this war is just a miserable experience.
So, given this came out in 98, well after the Vietnam War.
Yes.
that's kind of the pinnacle war of like pointless death. And yet The Thin Red Line is about a key essential battle and a key essential war.
And that's what I find so interesting about this movie is that in Hollywood, World War II is very much like, it's the cinematic. It's the good war.
It's the good war. Yeah.
There's a reason there's so many World War II movies because like it's very hard to argue with. We were doing the right thing in World War II. There were some very morally gray areas of the war.
Yeah.
Such as like, experimentation and
dropping the
bombs.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like it's hard to argue
good
against
versus evil.
People fighting Nazis.
And it's easy.
Yes.
Because we're going to get into a philosophical conversation real quick into this podcast.
Yes.
But
I mean, this is a philosophical movie.
I feel warranted. Yeah. Thank you for that. 100% agree that like you knew who the enemy was at World War II. I feel like nowadays with war and terror and all those other
pretty much any war post World War II.
Yeah, it really becomes more like I
mean, basically any Vietnam movie is asking the question, are we the bad guys?
Yeah.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies?
Yeah. And so, and not even just in the philosophical sense about making a movie about World War II and how easy it is to like, cartoonize how evil the Nazis and the Japanese Empire was. Mm-hmm. But also the cinematic nature of it.
Yes.
Because
World War II is a very cinematic war.
It is. We're not in trenches.
Yeah.
I mean, 1917 came out, and like to think that, to make World War I look as cinematic as possible, they shot the entire fucking movie. I know it wasn't actually all one shot, but to make it look like it was all one shot.
I'm going to sidebar.
Yeah.
I get so fucking frustrated when people talk about 1917. They're like, oh, it was made to look like one shot. In the middle of the movie, there is a very specific cut.
Yes.
He gets hit, he gets knocked out, it goes to black. It comes back in a different angle.
I don't argue that one bit.
I'm not arguing with you. I just get really annoyed when people are like, it's all made to look like one shot. And I'm like, no, it is made to look like two shots. Get your fucking shit together.
Okay.
Get your shit together.
Fair point, Jeff. All right. But the fact that those are the measures that they had to take to really squeeze that lemon of good cinematography for a World War I film.
Yeah.
Because it was all fought in plain green,
it was
guys, flat land.
It was guys 100
trenches.
feet apart from each other in a trench.
Yep.
They would maybe achieve like 6 feet a day.
Yep. Whereas World War II, we're talking like post-apocalyptic Paris, France.
Yeah.
We're talking about the jungles and the islands of the Pacific.
Yeah.
We're talking about airfields and naval battles.
Large groups of guys fighting each other.
Large scale, like bombings and everything. Like World War II, if you just read it on paper, there's movie scenes in there. It like D-Day. Mm-hmm. D-Day and Saving Private Ryan. It's like as brutal, awful as it is to watch that scene, like all Spielberg had to do was do shaky cam.
Yes. It sells itself.
And it fast cut, fast paced, put a lot of extras on the beach and get some blood spattering guns and VFX and some machine gun fire, and boom.
Yeah.
It's like it's not complicated. Mm-hmm. D-Day itself is a cinematic like event. And so, and going back to The Thin Red Line, this is particular about the Guadalcanal battle, which was a key essential battle in the war in the Pacific.
Yes.
So to go on another tangent, have you seen the HBO series The Pacific, which was a Spielberg Hanks executive produced one?
I have seen the first 3 episodes of the Band of Brothers, and I have not seen anything else.
I haven't seen much of Band of Brothers. Well, The Pacific is like Band of Brothers, but
Band of Brothers in the Pacific.
In the Pacific.
And they're making a 3rd one.
About called what?
About the air campaign. For some reason, Hanks and Spielberg decide every 10 years they're going to do a World War II miniseries.
I mean, okay. I'm not going to argue that.
Yeah.
But The Pacific does float from like episode 1's like Guadalcanal, episode 2 is like Iwo Jima, and then episode 3 is Okinawa. Like it is like, and you follow these.
To correct you, episode 1 is the Phantom Menace, but go on.
You want me to stop with the tangents?
No, keep going with the tangents. No, I enjoy. I just had to.
Okay. Well, it's interesting where they talk about the futility because that was something that historically speaking was
essential for the war.
essential, but everyone is particularly like when you hear the stories of the soldiers that were the Marines who fought in the Pacific against the Japanese Empire, was the strange method that we did on that war, which was we went from small speck of island to small speck of island.
Yeah.
Until we got to Japan.
It was an island hopping campaign.
It was an island hopping, yeah. And it just seemed, and it seemed like an odd strategy because, in Germany, everything's landlocked.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just come in and just send all your forces west while Russia's going east, and you just, converge on your enemy. Whereas the Japanese Empire had all these little airfields and territories around the Pacific, which were strategic in some places. But there were always questions and thoughts of which islands do we hit? Yeah. Which islands do we not hit? And why aren't we just going straight to the Japanese mainland? Or why are we not going through China? Or why are we not going through Vietnam? All these different ways. The fact that we island hopped and sacrificed a lot of men because the thing about the strategic strategy with the Japanese soldiers on these islands is how dug in they all were. I mean,
quite literally dug in.
Iwo Jima is the size. Iwo Jima, I believe, we should fact check me on this.
I'm gonna look it up.
Is the bloodiest battle in World War II? Fact check me on that. What was the bloodiest battle in World War II? I'm pretty sure it was Iwo Jima.
Bloodiest battle, World War II.
And they might say bloodiest battle in the Pacific or
the
bloodiest.
Battle of Okinawa was the bloodiest.
Which is another war in the Pacific island against Japan.
Yeah, it was 180,000 U.S. troops to send on the Pacific island of Okinawa.
What was Iwo Jima, though? How many people died in Iwo Jima? The reason why I'm so on it is because Iwo Jima is the pinnacle example of what was wrong with our strategy. Because Iwo Jima is a rock. It's not a jungle. There's hardly any trees at all. It's a flat patch of land. Well, it's not flat. It's hilly. But it's the size of Central Park in Manhattan. It's so small. But because it had an airfield, it was one of the islands that the U.S. Marine needed to take. And we lost so many guys in that battle because of how well built in all of the defenses were in that island.
Yeah.
And that was the key pinnacle example of what people thought was wrong with our strategy in the war in the Pacific was our island hopping strategy. So to go back to this movie, The Thin Red Line, Guadalcanal, it kind of starts with that sort of position, which is we're attacking this random ass island.
Yeah.
Why it matters to our victory over Japan, we don't know, but we're told it matters anyway. And something this movie is, to build off of that, something this movie is very interested in is kind of the concept of war in its misery and futility as a situation where someone in power is sending a bunch of other people to fight for their problem or their glory, in a sense. Right.
Whether it's, a politician or a president sending people to war because that president is at war with or has disagreements with the president of another country or whatnot. Or if it's the commander of the battalion who's sending his men to battle for his glory because it's his last campaign.
Yeah.
Who's the Nick Nolte character in the film.
Right.
Also kind of the John Travolta character in the film, but he doesn't have as many scenes.
Right. He has
one scene.
One scene in the entire movie.
Yes. Which we'll get to.
Which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this movie, I think, is a very, we've said contemplative. It's just very focused on those ideas of what is, at the end of the day, the reason that all these people died and were so awful to each other.
And then to tag on to that, Terrence Malick directed it.
Yes, Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
Let's go into Terrence Malick. Since we kind of set the tone for the war.
Yeah.
Going to Terrence Malick. Terrence Malick, director of this film, director of several other films. Some of them you may have heard of, some of them you may have not. Movies like Tree of Life, New World. He started, as did many of the directors we've covered, with the New Hollywood movement in the 70s. Two films come out then, Badlands and Days of Heaven. Days of Heaven being a Martin Sheen vehicle. That is a very lovely little movie. I would highly recommend it. It's not a little movie, but very lovely movie. And then he just basically retires. He does 2 movies. He's like, all right, I got to take some time off. He goes off. He's a very mysterious figure. He doesn't like his photo taken. So for the longest time, there was just this one image of him in like a straw hat that would appear on every single like IMDb and Wikipedia page of Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
He has since gotten better, and like he attends premieres now and lets pictures being taken of him. But he takes 20 years off. Days of Heaven was 1978. He comes back. He starts like getting word in the mid 90s that he's going to make another movie. And immediately Hollywood like loses their mind, because like if Malick's coming back, he did 2 masterpieces. He was known for just being a mysterious figure who everyone wanted to work with at the time.
Yeah.
Never got the opportunity because you stopped making movies for 20 years.
Yeah.
And immediately everyone wants to be in business with him.
And that kind of answers a lot of the questions about this movie.
Yes. He gets... There was some question about funding this movie, but at the end of the day, the producers kind of just like gave him carte blanche. They gave him a blank check for this movie.
What was the budget?
The budget of this movie was $52 million.
Jesus Christ.
Because like they were like, oh, we got, here's an old Entertainment Weekly article. The producers kind of talked about they got Malick to agree to work with them by catering to his every whim. They basically just let him do whatever he wanted in pre-production.
Yeah.
He wrote a 300-page script. He started writing it in like 1989. The movie didn't come out until 9 years later. So he obviously took a lot of time rewriting and working on it. And kind of putting the thing together. There was a time when Sony pulled the plug on the movie because it was getting too expensive. Malick found new producers. They came back and they, got the movie made. But also, Malick had to cast the movie. And like I said, everyone wanted to work with Terrence Malick. So this movie has one of the most stacked casts I think I've ever seen in the movie.
Honestly, I think those most stacked cast I've ever seen.
I think
as well.
every single actor ever is in this movie.
Every single male actor.
Every single male actor is in this movie.
Yeah.
And then also Miranda Otto is in this movie.
Yeah, she is in this
the
movie.
one female character.
And don't ask what her development is, folks. You'll just get upset.
Yes.
No lines.
Yeah, and Terrence, I'll get back to the actors, but Terrence Malick has a very specific way of filming movies.
Yes.
There's this Michael Fassbender quote I always remember from, I think it was a Knight of Cups or a Song to Song. I think he's in both of them. But Michael Fassbender was describing working with Terrence Malick. He's like, you will be there in front of the camera, acting your heart out, giving the best performance you think you've ever given. You will look at Terry, and he's 30 feet away filming a lizard on a rock.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in this movie, too.
Malick basically...
Random cutaways to
Yes.
small insects.
Malick does a lot of nature photography during it. He likes, kind of a free camera.
Mm-hmm.
Where he'll be like, he'll look at the actors, and then he'll just see something, and then he'll turn the camera away, grab that. And then in the edit, he finds a lot of his movies in the editing room. He overshoots.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of pieces it all together into a thematic line, even if it's not like a direct story line.
Right.
Like, there's moments in this movie where like someone gets shot, and rather than like showing them get shot, it like cuts to a tree like falling over, or like an insect like jumping.
Yeah.
And it all works. It all comes together.
It definitely, you never feel discharged from the theme.
Yes.
Of what it's trying to say. It always is very consistent. As much as you might feel disheveled narratively sometimes, where it's like, wait, who are we focusing on now? Like, who's the main character of this movie, and like, what's exactly happening here? I feel like thematically speaking, it's all sort of being hounded with every single frame and every single scene. That I read on IMDb trivia, as resourceful as that is.
Yes.
That Malick shot almost everything like under 3 lighting conditions.
Yes.
One was like direct sunlight. One
Cloud
was
cover and
cloud
then
cover.
His ideal.
And then one was like ideal. What does ideal mean?
Ideal probably means that they lit it. Like they would add flags and whatnot.
Interesting.
Like he his movies are shot in almost a documentary style. Where a lot of it's like, kind of figuring out the camera angles in the moment.
Yeah.
And then obviously capturing a lot of that nature photography and whatnot. But I think when it comes to the lighting, he's just like, all right, let's just shoot it. And then he's like, all right, cloud's coming, let's just shoot it again. And then he's like, all right, gaffer, key grip, you guys go in there for 10 minutes, figure something out, and then we'll shoot it again.
I have a short little story from a project that I'm currently working on right now, which will remain nameless. But this is going to sound very film bro, by the way, so you might as well mark the dinger right now.
Yeah.
So for folks who are non-filmmakers who listen to this podcast, oftentimes, like when we see like an exterior on our call sheet or on our schedule, most of the time we're gonna move fairly quickly lighting-wise.
Yeah.
Because obviously the sun is your main source of light. And but what comes with that are some pros and cons. What I just listed before with pros, shooting outside in the sun, is that it's shorter time for lighting setups. But one of the negatives is like direct sunlight is not always the most favorable conditions.
Yes, it can look ugly.
It can look pretty ugly. Like you have a lot of harsh shadows. You have to put a lot of filters in for the camera so it like balances out the lighting in some kind. You don't get that much like contour depth and all that stuff. Well, everybody always tells me that the best exterior day lighting condition is overcast.
Yes.
Overcast is the best because clouds are just one giant fucking bounce or one giant diffusion to the sun that sort of softens and flattens like everything. That gives you a little bit more dynamic like range to work with for if you want to do something different in post. Whereas direct sunlight, you're kind of like cornered into that contrast, that look. So when I saw that, well, basically what I was going to say in my story is we were shooting an exterior day scene. It's the first thing on our schedule.
Yeah.
And our call time was like noon. Sun is directly above us, not a cloud in sight. We start shooting, and then about an hour in, our AD goes to the walkie and says, all right, so we're actually going to move inside and shoot the interior first, and then we're going to come out and shoot this right before we go to lunch. It's going to be at like 6 p.m., which for what it is right now, it is September 12th. Like 6 p.m. is not quite sunset.
This is our first episode recording in a post-Matrix Resurrections trailer world.
We should talk about that at some point. But anyway, no, so the sun is like not quite setting yet, but it's also behind enough buildings to cast like a giant shadow over it. But it's still daylight enough out where you get your exposure that you need. And then they reshot it that way. So this whole idea of like, really? Like they're going to like reshoot scenes, particularly because of the daylight and how it looks? I'm like, yeah, that happens.
And the thing is, like, when we say like they shot each scene 3 times, it's not they shot each scene 3 times like in a row. They shot the scene and then sometimes they come back to it weeks later and shoot it in different conditions.
Right.
Because the first like 2 hours of this movie are ostensibly the exact same set.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2 hours of the movie is basically them just taking a hill on Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
And then the latter hour is them defending the hill and going down the other side. Which is
pretty much.
It's funny for a 3-hour movie. They maybe achieve like 1 mile of distance in terms of
which goes with the theme of the whole movie.
Yes, the pointlessness of it all.
Yeah.
I looked up. Did you have more to say about the story, or was that the?
No, that was basically it. Just like the madness nature of filmmaking and how Terrence Malick embodies that at times.
Yeah, I looked up the because I had mentioned like the funding got pulled for this at one point. I looked up the context of that. Sony had agreed to fund the movie for a good while prior to its release through the producers of the movie. There's Michael Gieser, Grant Hill, and John Roberdeau were the 3 producers on the film. By the end of it, they did not speak to Terrence Malick anymore.
There's a lot of stories like that.
There's a lot of stories that he hated the producers and did not want them on set.
At one point, he would bar them.
He's a genuine artist, and wants his art not being filtered by, development executives and whatnot.
Yeah.
But Sony pulled the movie because they didn't think it could be accomplished. 3 different production companies, including Fox, who ended up releasing the film, swept in and gave the $52 million budget, which the movie was shot with. and succeeded with.
And for reference, Saving Private Ryan was $70 million.
$70 million, yes.
Yeah.
So this was shot for cheaper than that. I think a big part of it was just that this has less locations than Saving Private Ryan, and
less battle scenes,
and less CGI.
Less CGI, less grand scale scenes, and
there's no like storming of a town in this movie. It's all wilderness.
Right. Well, I can imagine like 20 million of the 70 million in Saving Private Ryan was all the D-Day scene.
Yeah.
Probably. Like for as fucking madness as that probably was.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The casting process of this movie was basically like a 4-year event.
Jeez.
Because word started seeping out that like Malick was going to make another movie around the mid-90s. And every male actor in Hollywood either got sent a script or requested the script or met with Malick at some point.
And it's also like World War II.
Yes.
Like, there were a lot of World War II movies that came out in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe it was like that dawn of the CGI that was helping.
And the 90s was a big period of like guys whose parents fought in World War II were at the age where they were making movies. And they want to make movies to commemorate them.
Yeah.
Which is why Spielberg made Saving Private Ryan, because he wanted to like commemorate his parents' generation and whatnot.
Same in Schindler's List, like just a few years earlier than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's very much like, the mid-90s is when that started to happen more so.
Yeah. So you hear Terrence Malick, you hear World War II film.
Yes.
I'm a guy.
Like
sign me up.
Literally every single actor is listed as like having met for like Martin Sheen apparently was in discussions for a long time because he'd worked with Malick. He'd worked with Malick before, and he apparently at all of like the auditions and like table reads and whatnot would read the screen directions, and then he does not appear in the movie and never filmed anything for it. He just liked working with Malick and thought he'd get a role, and he didn't.
Wow.
Which I'm sure he harbors no ill will over. But here's just a list of just casual names that I can just see.
Oh, yes. Please list some of these casual names to our audience.
Robert De Niro, Robert Duvall, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Al Pacino, Gary Oldman, George Clooney, Kevin Costner, Will Patton, Peter Berg, Lucas Ox, Dermot Mulroney, Johnny Depp, Edward Norton, Matthew McConaughey, William Baldwin, Ed Burns, Josh Hartnett, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Stephen Dorff, Leonardo DiCaprio, Nick Cage, Tom Sizemore, Bill Pullman, Mickey Rourke. Most of these people ended up not filming anything for the movie.
Yeah.
But they all met for it.
But a lot of people were in this movie, though.
Yes. The main characters of this movie are basically Jim Caviezel as I cannot remember any of the names of this movie.
I do not know.
Private Robert E. Lee Witt. I think they just call him Witt in the movie.
Yeah.
Jim Caviezel is more or less the lead.
Yeah.
Sean Penn gets top billing.
Right.
But Jim Caviezel is basically the lead. Adrian Brody is also in a lot of this movie, though he doesn't have any lines. Because he's the main character of the book.
Yeah, this is based on a novel, by the way.
It's based on a novel.
Yeah.
And Adrian Brody is the main character of the novel. But he's not the main character of this movie. He has no lines in this movie.
You have Nick Nolte.
Yes.
Who is one of the main faces of this movie as well.
I'm just going to judge like main character off of people who have monologues in this movie. It's basically Jim Caviezel, Sean Penn, Nick Nolte, and Elias Koteas.
You wouldn't put Woody Harrelson in there? Because I know he does. Spoiler: he dies.
Yeah,
pretty early in the movie.
He's not in it long enough. Okay, Elias Koteas is in more of that than him.
That's true. Jared Leto's in this.
Yeah. Fun fact: Elias Koteas was on the show I work on for like 4 seasons, Chicago PD. He's no longer on it, but
how was he?
I never worked with him. Oh, okay. But yeah, he
passed up on a really good story there.
I did. That was a great story that I was able to tell right there.
Yeah.
But basically, like, they filmed it with Adrian Brody as the lead. He ended up not being the lead because of Malick's like weird editing. And from what all the actors involved in this movie talk about, like, none of them were really sure how big their role was going to be. They would film for weeks. Like, George Clooney filmed for weeks, and he's in one shot.
Yeah.
what's his name? Billy Bob Thornton filmed for quite a while.
Oh my gosh.
And is not in this movie. Billy Bob Thornton apparently spent months recording monologues for this movie that are not in the movie.
Jesus.
Now, I have a little inside scoop.
Tell me the scoop.
Billy Bob Thornton, the reason why they ended up not using him is because he showed up in character as Sling Blade, and he refused to no.
Shut the fuck up.
Trying to shut my mic.
Shut the fuck up.
And he refused to get out of character.
I'm turning your mic volume all the way down. It's going all the way down.
No.
Goodbye.
You can hear me. You can
Stop.
hear me. You can hear me. I know you can hear me. But like it just turn my volume back up.
I never turn it down. But can we please?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it would just be watching a scene. There'll be like all these troops and they're running through the jungle, and then you hear, French fried potatoes. I reckon the Japanese be taking over, but I reckon around 5-ish o'clock, I got me my sling blade. I reckon. He just monologued for months in the sling blade voice about the futility of war. And also how he wanted. Reckon I have me some of the big uns. But it is actually true that Billy Bob Thornton did record months of dialogue for this movie.
And you don't know the real reason why he's not in that, other than Terrence Malick's editing style.
Because he showed up in character as himself from Primary Colors.
All right. Okay. So, no, I was going to go off of a tangent where you fucking derailed the podcast again. Alien Covenant.
Yes, good movie.
James Franco.
In one scene. One shot.
In one shot. Dead.
Yeah. Well, that was just because his best friend was in the movie and he wanted to work with him.
So, like, he wasn't in, like, any other scenes that got cut?
No. They filmed, like, a prequel short film that James Franco was in. But he just wanted to be an Alien Covenant because he wanted to work with Ridley Scott, and he was best friends with Danny McBride. And also this is before he, like, sent dick pics to, like, a 17-year-old.
Right.
But, yeah, that's why James Franco's not in that movie much.
Okay. Copy that. All right. So, but yeah, there are a lot of actors in this.
Every single actor ever is in this movie.
And including our boy.
John Travolta. Who appears very early on in the movie. I suppose we could just jump right into the...
we talked 30 minutes about context corner in this movie.
Yes.
And I feel like I let that kind of happen because I feel like once we actually get into the plot,
yeah,
we're not going to have that much to say. At least I won't.
I mean, this movie doesn't have a plot necessarily.
Here's my contribution. Like, the way I'm going to talk about the plot of this movie is by which actors pop up when and where and when they stop.
We can basically just talk about individual characters.
Yeah.
But last bit of context for this movie.
Yeah.
It's shot for roughly like 130, 140 days.
Damn.
Which is a long shoot.
Wow.
100 of them was in Australia. They were going to try and shoot at actual Guadalcanal, but logistically it was just going to be impossible.
Yeah.
With the amount of extras and people they'd have to bring to
fucking infrastructure.
Yeah, to a historic battle site to like a nearly abandoned jungle.
That's where like something about like work again. Mark the dinger right now for Film Bro Talk, but working more in like film now.
Yeah.
I realize how important infrastructure is.
Yes.
This whole fucking idea where it's like, yeah, we spent 7 days in the jungle filming this one scene. I'm like, bullshit, you did. You mean to tell me, listen, Willem Dafoe had a trailer.
Yeah.
And like Charlie Sheen had a Pimo he could use. And like they all had like places, private changing areas where they could change into their soldier outfits, and then a fucking Jeep that took them back to their hotel in Thailand or whatever. Don't you tell me that we just like bummed it out in the jungle with our camera team and our sound department for 7 days. No, you did not. You had cars, you had equipment. Like, people, listen to me. Like, the film industry is surrounded by luxury. And as brutal as it might be on the grunt workers like Jeff and I, it is still like they have to have some decency in how they treat people. And sometimes there's a lot of money put into these movies, and a good portion of it goes into making sure you can fucking shoot safely and logistically.
Yes.
So, yeah, Guadalcanal, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. They attempted it, but as John Toll shot this film, beautifully shot movie.
Yeah, beautiful shot.
He's also shooting Wait, no, he's not. Never mind.
What were we going to say?
Wait, is he?
What?
He's shooting Matrix Resurrections, I think.
Is he?
Yeah.
Did he shoot all the other Matrix
He did
movies?
not. Bill Pope shot the first 3 and did not have a good experience in the sequel, so he's not shooting the new one. Anyway, it's enough Matrix talk.
Has any plot things come out of the Matrix Resurrection? Like, do we know what it's like kind of about?
No, not in the slightest.
What does like the IMDb say?
I have read ideas and theories.
Like what? Let's talk about it.
Okay. You're the one who wanted to wrap this up.
It says The Matrix Resurrections 2021. The plot is currently unknown, and it's a poster of the red and blue pill.
Yes.
The choice is yours. So, don't.
I'm not doing it.
Don't.
But there's a really fun idea that you've watched the trailer for Matrix Resurrections.
I've watched the teaser. I have not watched the full trailer.
You haven't watched the trailer?
I have not watched the trailer.
What are you doing with your life?
I haven't watched the trailer for I haven't watched movies, bro.
Yeah.
Other than the fucking John Travolta movies that I have to watch every fucking week.
Every other week.
Yeah.
But at the end of the trailer, like Keanu looks like present day Keanu, like he has the beard and the long hair and everything. And at the end of the movie, a character says to him, like, back to where it all began, back to the Matrix. Using the term the Matrix. And so and at multiple points in the trailer for Matrix Resurrections, you can see shots from the original Matrix movie. Being played on TVs and projectors within the world of the Matrix.
Wait. What?
So we're
not talking about reimagined.
No, we're talking like
scene,
like Keanu Reeves is standing in front of a shot of Keanu Reeves from the first Matrix movie.
Like a TV playing.
And not like a security camera, like an actual shot from the movie.
Like a TV playing the shot.
Yes, like a TV is playing the Matrix.
And he's watching it.
Yes. And so there's theories that the plot of the movie is Thomas Anderson is an actor who is in the movie The Matrix. And while filming a 4th Matrix movie, discovers he's actually in the Matrix, and that the Matrix has created the Matrix within itself. Like the Matrix has created the movie The Matrix within itself to fool people and Neo from not knowing that they are within the Matrix.
Okay, so this is actually a YouTuber film theory.
This does not sound like the best movie ever made.
So this was actually... We're going to go on this tangent. It's fine.
We're going on the Matrix tangent.
So Film Theory, which is a YouTube channel, I'm going to give credit, although he's a much bigger channel than we are, had a series of YouTube videos about the theory of the Matrix. And it was talking about particularly with the end of Matrix Reloaded, where when Neo gets out of the Matrix and he's able to stop the, what are they called, Sentinels?
Yes.
Yeah, the Sentinels with his with telekinetic powers. And he's like, how... It's like, in the movie, they say that it's because... that his powers in the Matrix are transferring slowly to his real-life body. Don't.
I'm not doing it. What do you... I just keep going.
Don't. But
I
what...
could have sworn I just saw Sling Blade walk in the room from the corner of my eye. I won't
dare. I will fucking end this fucking podcast.
All right, just keep going. Keep going about the Matrix.
Okay, so he was talking about how... in the movie, it describes that Neo's Matrix powers are slowly transferring into his real life body. But what the film theorist, what he says is that
when they escape the Matrix, they're still in the Matrix.
They're still in the Matrix.
They're
and
just
that
in a different
the
layer of the
machines
Matrix.
created multiple layers to the Matrix to instill control.
Yes.
So, it makes people think. And it makes sense when you go through the whole architect monologue scene. Yeah. That they planned Zion all along, that they were a part of it, that they do this every cycle or whatever, where they crush, they let 10 people escape the Matrix, create Zion, and then they destroy it. They reset the Matrix or whatever, and then they do it again because that fixes the anomaly of Neo or whatever the fuck. And he's like, that could all just be bullshit. It's just something to tell Neo so he doesn't doubt that.
God, do you ever think about how The Matrix is the best movie ever made?
I mean, it's pretty good.
It's the best movie ever made.
Okay.
It's up there.
Is this a bit you're doing?
No,
or
I'm
what?
dead serious. It's
Yeah,
up, it's up
I mean,
there.
a lot of people would probably agree with that statement that The Matrix is one of the best movies ever
great.
made. And then they had 2 really bad sequels.
No, hey. Reloaded rules. And then Revolutions is pretty good. If The Matrix is a 5 out of 5, Matrix Reloaded is like a 4.5 out of 5.
Really?
Revolutions is maybe like a 3.5 or a 4.
Can you tell me the architect's speech memorized? No. Don't look it up. Just memorized.
The sequence of events that has brought you here is I cannot do it off the top of my head, but here.
And you still gonna call it a 4.5 out of 5?
Yeah. You expect me to memorize the entire architect's speech?
It just seems like something you would do, that you would memorize some shit like that. Because that's like probably
I'm the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. You have many questions of the processes alter your consciousness and your brain irrevocably human. Ergo, some of my answers you will understand and some you will not. Concordantly, while your first question may be the most pertinent, you may or may not realize it is also irrelevant. Your life is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the Matrix. You are the eventuality of an anomaly, which despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision. While it reigns a burden to sedulously avoid, it is not unexpected and thus not beyond a measure to control, which has led you inexorably here. The first Matrix I designed was going... I'm not going to keep doing this.
Okay.
But...
what were we talking about? The Thin Red Line.
Yes.
We're 40 minutes into this podcast.
Yes, and that was the Matrix. That was Matrix talk.
Yeah.
The new movie looks really good. Great movies. But they shot for... I said they shot for like 100 days in Australia, which is where the bulk of this movie is shot. They did some days on the Solomon Islands and 3 days in the United States. The Solomon Island stuff was, I'm presuming, the like community that Jim Caviezel starts the movie with.
Yeah.
And the United States is probably just the Miranda Otto stuff that they mostly cut from the movie.
Yeah.
Travolta might have also been that stuff.
Yeah, like the Navy ship scenes were probably all in the U.S.
Yeah, those might
I would imagine.
But right before, and we mentioned there was a rift between the producers and Malick. Right before the movie starts filming, Malick has a clause inserted in his contract that the producers are not allowed to come to set. They said they didn't think he was capable of betrayal of this magnitude. Kind of a baller move that he just gets $52 million, bars the people who gave it to him from coming to set, and then just goes off for 130 days and shoots a movie.
I mean, it worked out for them, right?
It worked out. This movie turned out pretty good. Yeah, that's we're fine. I'm done with context for this movie. We could just launch right into it.
45 minutes into this podcast, we're going to start talking about the plot.
Yes. Well, there isn't one. We're just going to have to talk about each character.
Yeah. So there's Jim Caviezel.
Jim Caviezel.
And we start off with like an alligator going into the water.
Yes.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, and then very, very normal, chill actor Jim Caviezel, who's never done anything wrong in his life, appears.
Yeah, of course.
A guy who is very chill and definitely doesn't support QAnon. But
wait, what?
It definitely hasn't happened.
I don't know this about Jim Caviezel.
Jim Caviezel, he's a very weird guy. He played Jesus in the Passion of the Christ and kind of just went from there into more insanity.
Oh, Mel Gibson. Why do you break everything we love?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very weird. But he's playing Private Witt, a U.S. private who has gone AWOL to live with a community of islanders in the South Pacific.
With another Marine, too, right? With
another Marine who we never really see again.
Yeah.
I'm presuming he was a character who had stuff and then was mostly just cut out of the movie.
Wonder if they were gay lovers.
Yeah. Possibly. This movie doesn't have enough time. It doesn't contemplate on that, but I'm sure it would if given another hour. Oh, God. But, I mean, it's Terrence Malick, so.
Yeah.
But he's basically, he's just living among this community. It's kind of just a beautiful, like, montage-y sequence, lasts for, like, 5-10 minutes-ish, of just, like, this very peaceful island life, which Malick is showing us to, like, contrast with the island that he's going to come to later. And when he goes back to this community, how it's changed.
Right.
By both his experience with war and just, like, the, you can never come home again idea.
Well, he doesn't really come home.
He doesn't. But he does come back to this community later.
Right.
Inexorably changed, to use the architect's words.
Thank you.
But he's there.
A ship shows up.
A U.S. Navy ship shows up. And who's aboard the ship?
Sean Penn.
Star of She's So Lovely.
From She's So Lovely.
Yes. And he's playing... I'm going to have this list of the names because they don't say any names in this movie.
I don't know many names.
He's playing Sergeant Edward Welsh.
Great. Moving on.
Yes.
But he's like a sergeant or something?
Yeah, he's the sergeant of the company.
Yeah, he's not top of command, but he's like second or third in command.
Yeah.
And so he's a superior officer.
And they lock Cavasio up in the brig.
Yeah.
And he's basically like, you cannot rejoin your unit because you went AWOL.
Yeah. So you're going to join a new outfit.
And you're going to join you're going to be a medic. You're going to be a stretcher carrier.
Yeah.
Which is a punishment in war because basically you just run and you get other people out of the war.
You pick up.
You don't do anything.
Dead bodies or injured bodies. Yes.
Yeah. But they're in C Company.
Mm-hmm.
They use C Company a lot in this movie because that is the organization that they're in. And this troop ship is heading towards Guadalcanal to reinforce the unit that's there, and then they're going to take the Japanese enforcement on the island.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to Nick Nolte around this point.
And John Travolta too, right?
Yes. Nick Nolte's playing Gordon Tall, a name that they never say in this movie.
He's the captain
of
the battalion?
He's the lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
Because Travolta is playing the... I think Travolta's playing...
Lieutenant
He's playing the general. Travolta's the general who's in charge of the whole campaign in this area.
It does say John. Oh my God, John C. Reilly is in this.
Yeah, he has like one line.
Brigadier General.
Yes.
Quintard.
Okay, John.
Yeah.
This is, Nolte's right underneath Travolta in this.
Right.
In terms of chain of command.
Yeah.
Travolta's giving Nolte control of this operation.
Yeah, he's commanding officer of the battalion.
Yeah. And we get a monologue, because this movie has a lot of monologues, as we said.
Yeah.
At this point, we've already skipped over like 7.
Right.
But Nick Nolte is just kind of monologuing in his head about he's old. This is his last war.
Yeah.
And this battle is basically his last chance for glory to like have his name written down in the history books and be remembered.
That's not going to produce any consequences later.
Something. Yes.
When we see Nick Nolte, we see John Travolta pretty quickly, right? Because his first scene is this conversation with John Travolta.
Yes.
So,
and he's just discussing the
organization.
The organization, the importance of the invasion.
Yeah. That you're going to be controlling these troops. I'm sending you in on this important mission.
This is a Travolta we've never really seen before. Is like kind of the stoic, older, like power guy man of power.
Can I say it?
Yes.
He has a mustache.
He has a mustache.
Cue the hair ranking. Welcome to the hair ranking. I'm your co-host, Stuart Elmore.
And I'm Jeff Sweeney.
John Travolta has a mustache.
Yes,
but he also wears a hat. He wears a sailor's hat.
Yeah, it's a little yin and yang right there. We'll give and take.
So, here's the beef. Do you remember back in 1980, when did Urban Cowboy come out?
1977, 78? 79, I think.
I can figure. 80. 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, 1980. So, you remember when I talked about the beard and John Travolta and how much I fucking loved it?
Yes.
But then I couldn't really give it that much pointers because it gets shaved off so quickly?
Yes.
Well, I mean, while we only see John Travolta for 3 minutes in this movie, he has 3 minutes of screen time, then he's gone.
He wears the hat the whole time.
He wears the hat the whole time, but he sports the mustache the whole time. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be very far on the list. So can I see the hair ranking?
Bringing it up right now.
It's not going to go very high up, but I want to see where Urban Cowboy is because I think it might
You
live.
have Urban Cowboy pretty low.
Yeah, and I think it's going to go around that region. So put it above Urban Cowboy, below She's So Lovely.
Oh, you're putting it above Urban Cowboy. You
Just
really like
Urban
that
Cowboy, he
mustache.
wears a fucking cowboy hat the entire time.
He wears a military hat the whole time in this.
Well, military hat's a lot sexier than the cowboy hat.
Okay, that's fair.
Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah, the sailor hat works much better. So then it comes to a comparison of facial hair, and the beard gets shaved off pretty quickly. This one, he keeps the mustache all 3 minutes.
All right, so there we go.
So there's the hair ranking. All right, back to...
So the two of them are discussing, the war.
yeah.
And Nick Nolte, and he mentions at one point, I believe, that Travolta's younger than him.
Yeah.
But Travolta's doing an exceptional job, I think, in the scene of displaying kind of the arrogance and power of a general in that position.
Yeah.
He is in charge of the scene.
He's in charge of the big picture.
Yes, he's in charge of the big picture. He's in charge of this specific scene. Malick's good with actors and establishing who's
in charge.
charge in each scene. He's good at power dynamics. He's good at the power dynamics.
Completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to comment on performance-wise that so quickly.
Yes.
But the one thing I will say about this with John Travolta is it does go to a common thread that we've been mentioning in our previous episodes, which is John Travolta is right up here with all of these A-list actors. Furthering our claim and our conclusion that this is the A-list era John Travolta.
This is his peak.
This is his peak. I mean, he is sharing this peak along with the peaks and valleys and hills of all these other actors that he's
the Guadalcanal Hills.
Yeah, on deck with. He's right there with Sean Penn. He's right there with Nick Nolte. He's right there with George Clooney. I mean, he's considered. I mean, him and George Clooney have the same amount of screen time.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yes.
That John Travolta, at a certain period of time, was thought of to be as famous, if not more famous, than George Clooney. That's the period we're in right now.
Yeah. And I think the performance he gives in this, albeit short, is a bellwether as to what the future of his career will become. Because he's starting to age. He's getting older. He's still in his 40s in this, so he's not old. But he's getting older, and he's starting to settle into kind of the... I'm trying to think of the wording for this, but the older boss figure. Something he'll do a lot of crime movies as later. In a lot of movies where he's the bad guy or the heavy or the tough overlord.
Yeah.
But this is the first time he's playing older, if that makes sense.
Okay.
In every movie we've covered so far, he's either playing young, or playing a lower status character. In this, he's playing high status.
Yeah. High status, a lot of control.
High status with a lot of control, a lot of gravitas. Gravitas is the word I'm looking for. This is the first John Travolta performance I'd say has a lot of gravitas to it. It's something he's going to kind of start settling into in the future, and I think it in part hurts him because he's a very charismatic actor, and when you strip away the charisma, he's good at gravitas, but it's not why you go to see a John Travolta movie.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's really not much more to say because this is a very short appearance in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think it is a bellwether as to what the future brings in regards to his career.
It's a very deep take on a short period.
A 3-minute scene.
Yeah. I mean, for me, again, to just reiterate, my takeaway of him being in this movie in a short scene is that he's right up there with all the A-list actors. And that he's kind of made it.
Yeah, he's made it to this point. The Malick picked him to be in this movie among this crowd of people who were there or rising.
Which means his name is equivalent, if not better.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's up there.
So, okay. They
make it to the island.
It's the D-Day invasion of the island. They're all on the boats.
They get to Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
Everyone's vomiting in the boats and the troop carriers. And they storm the beach, and what do they find? Nothing. There's no one there.
Yeah.
They're and they all run up. They all expecting gunfire, and they get there, and there's just they find some remnants that there were people there.
Yeah.
But they soon discover that the Japanese have taken a hill, which, according to this summary of the movie, is Hill 210. I have no memory of that being said in the movie, but it's Hill 210.
And this is something that, historically speaking, I have a lot of interest in, which is the particular battle strategies that the Japanese Empire implemented with their troops.
Yeah.
Was like the hunker down, dig deep.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've watched documentaries on like World War II, particularly battles in the Pacific, the tunnels that the Japanese would dig in these islands was like a whole fucking infrastructure.
It was a network.
You could literally, I mean, I love the scene where they're going over the hill, they're lifting up like these little baskets and tossing in grenades, but like that little entryway could take you to the other end of the island.
Yeah.
With like another like, you know, lid that you could like come up, and that was the tactical advantage that the Japanese had on all these islands. And the U.S. troops are just guys on foot.
Yeah.
Walking in these jungles that they had no familiarity with. You know, the Japanese soldiers have been there for months getting like encamped, entrenched, and like getting familiar with the island. So like, this is going to sound really bad what I'm about to say, but I played a lot of World War II video games.
You said it.
And in World War II first-person shooters, particularly Call of Duty 5, World at War, when you're fighting in the Pacific. Call of
Duty 5. I mean, it is the 5th, but it was just Call of Duty World at War.
I know, but just fuck you. Okay.
Calling it Call of Duty 17 or Warzone or whatever the hell they're on now.
So you couldn't just like aim at eye level where your enemies would be. You'd have to aim down at the ground and up at the trees.
Yes.
Because they're in the fucking trees, man. They're in the fucking trees.
Yeah.
So, and then that's when we got real ugly with our warfare by just carrying flamethrowers.
Yes.
And
that's when things got bad.
That's when things got very morally gray.
Yes.
And our warfare tactics, which a lot of people don't like to talk about, but we definitely burned whole forests down.
But you know who did want to talk about it? Terrence Malick. In this movie.
Yeah.
Because later in the movie, when things start getting very morally gray, and we start kind of seeing the effects that this war has on the characters and the landscape, flamethrowers are introduced into the plot.
Yeah.
But at this point, they haven't yet. And all the troops get to the bottom. We're basically, at this point, following like 2 squads.
Yeah. One is the Soros guy.
Yes, Staros, played by Elias Koteas.
And then
Woody Harrelson's in his group as well.
And you got Sean Penn.
But then there's Sean Penn, who has Adrian Brody, and at parts and at times Caviezel with him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other actors who are popping in. Like I'm like, oh look, Jared Leto, Tim Blake Nelson, John C. Reilly, and then I think Jared Leto explodes.
Yeah.
He's taken out very quickly. You know, for this movie, he actually blew himself up, so he could really get into role as the character.
Just shut the fuck. Come on.
He actually blew himself up.
Come on, man.
And he had to restitch himself back together.
And so when they get on this island, they don't find anybody.
Yes.
So there's just like a long-winded montage-y scene where they're just like searching.
Mm-hmm.
They're just going through the jungle, looking for any bunkers or hills or things they got to take, and they're just searching.
Yeah.
And they finally get to their first like objective, which
Hill
is
210.
Hill 210. And that's when they're planning the assault, and Nick Nolte is saying that we only have one option of doing a full frontal assault, which is like the first thing you hear in that movie is full frontal assault. Everybody in the audience is immediately going to think, bad idea.
Yes.
If there's any...
You know who else thinks of the characters in the movie?
It's characters in the movie.
It's on, Elias Koteas is like, that's a bad idea. We're not doing it.
It's like, why don't we like go into the jungle and flank them or something? It's like, no, like the jungle's too thick. We don't...
Nolte wants his glory charge.
Yes.
He wants to be remembered as the guy who led the charge up the hill.
And
even though he will not physically be leading the charge.
No, of course not.
Because why would he do that?
He's, lieutenant colonel.
Yes. Why would the people in charge of wars be actually fighting them?
Yeah.
No.
So they begin their assault.
Yes.
And they start by bombarding the hill
with mortar fire.
Mortar fire.
And Nolte says that the mortars aren't going to do anything.
Yes. I'm glad you remembered that. I was going to say the same thing. He says very clearly, it's like, well, like they're probably not going to do anything, but they'll inspirit the men. Like the men will think it's doing something.
Like it's going to cause a lot of explosions at the top of the mountain. The Japanese are too dug in. They're not going to... No, maybe it'll kill like 2 guys.
It'll shake them up a little bit.
But our soldiers would be like, yeah, we're bombing the hell out of them. Let's take them.
Yeah. It's really more for morale.
They all charge the hill, and it goes very poorly. It goes, to say the least.
Well, they charge the hill like one bit at a time.
Yeah.
They go up a few like feet, and then they duck
There's
down
just, like,
in the grass.
heavy machine gun fire.
Yeah, and then
we're seeing a lot of guys get blown apart. A lot of trees and insects jumping around.
Yeah.
Crocodiles biting.
Yeah. Woody Harrelson.
Jared Leto gets killed. Woody Harrelson is leading a squad, and he accidentally pulls a pin on his grenade.
And he hops over into the bunker and blows his ass off.
He's like, I blew my ass off.
It's like, I'm not going to be able to fuck again. And then he just slowly... There's a lot of slow bleed outs in this. No one really dies instantaneous in this movie.
This movie luxuriates in kind of misery.
Slow death.
In the pain of war.
People get shot and they're still alive for a while. There's like one scene in particular when they're at the top of the hill, and like one of the guys, right before they're about to charge, a guy gets shot, and they ask like, "Is he dead?" And they're just like, "Not yet." And it's like, "Well, stay with him until he dies." And he's right there, and he's fully conscious. And
there's a part where Sean Penn just intentionally overdoses a dying soldier on morphine.
Yeah.
Because he knows he'll just suffer if they pull him, if they try and get him back down the hill. He won't make it in time to rescue him. He'll just die slowly bleeding out.
Fun fact. The Battle of the Bulge in Germany.
Yes.
I know this because my grandfather's brother fought in World War II. Mm-hmm. And while my grandfather's brother was well dead before I could remember anything, my grandfather had a lot of stories that he would tell. In the Battle of the Bulge, Germans were known for switching bullets for wooden bullets because it was more valuable to wound a soldier than kill a soldier. Because if you wounded a soldier, 5 soldiers would go to that one soldier to help them, and it made it easier in target, and it would pull soldiers away from their attack. Yeah. So there was, and the Japanese did the same thing with booby traps, that many of their booby traps weren't lethal. They were all very injury prone. Yeah. And that was the whole thought process, which was it's better to injure a guy so you have more soldiers go to that person's aid, making them a better target, but also taking away more guns aiming your way. Yeah. Fucked up.
Yeah,
Fun
war
fact.
War is fucked.
But yeah, and
Terrence Malick quote: "War is fucked.
War is fucked." So there's a lot of casualties. I'm starting to lose grip on the narrative at this point.
Yeah, this movie doesn't have a narrative.
Right.
Which is why it's hard for us to... We basically have gotten an hour into the movie at this point.
And we're an hour into this podcast.
We've gotten an hour and 10 minutes of conversation.
Yeah. So
because the first 2 hours of this movie are just the siege of this hill.
Yeah. And there's arguments going on with Nick Nolte and... I keep forgetting the other fucking guy's name. Not Soros.
Staros, played by Elias Koteas.
Elias Koteas. So Elias Koteas and Nick Nolte are having these conversations over the communications telephone. They're like, with all due respect, sir, you're not up here. You don't see what's going on. He's like,
and Nick Nolte's like, you take the hill.
And so they're
take the hill.
You take the hill, man. You gotta be tough. Our boys are tough, man.
Our boys are tough. We're gonna take this hill. I gotta get the glory for this.
Can we just talk about Nick Nolte and Hulk 2003?
He's great in that movie.
He's so fucking good.
He's so good in that movie.
You just watch me go.
You just watch me go.
And he chews the wire and turns into the electric guy, man.
I'm your father, bro.
The more you fight, the more I take.
You know what I like in Hulk 2003?
What do you like?
Is his first scene in the movie, aside from the flashbacks, is he's pretending to be a janitor at Banner's research lab. Yeah. And this guard's like, "Can I help you with something?" He's trying to be incognito, but he looks insane.
He looks sketchy as fuck.
He's just trying to not show his face. And he's kind of getting away with it, except for the fact that when he starts talking, he's like, "I don't know anything about it." I was like, "No, that's very clearly Nick Nolte."
Well, there is one. What's the fucking actress name? It plays Betty in Hulk 2003.
Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly. So there's a scene where Jennifer Connelly is coming out and she sees Nick Nolte, the janitor. It's "Oh, what happened to?" I don't know what fucking name. Pam. It's Pam's. No, he literally just Pam is dead. I'm dead. It's yeah, she died a few weeks back. I'm the new guy.
I'm the new guy.
Oh, well, thank you. It's anytime.
It's great that Nick Nolte sounded like that, in the 80s.
Hot take, best Hulk movie.
Yes. Well, it depends.
No, it doesn't depend on anything.
Are you defining Hulk movie as
Eric Bana.
Are you defining Hulk movie as a movie about the Hulk or a movie in which the Hulk appears?
It is better than Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton.
Yes.
It is better than Thor Ragnarok. The Hulk in it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I will clarify this.
Okay, clarify what you mean by best Hulk movie.
It is the best utilization of Hulk and Bruce Banner, character and action-wise, my opinion.
I don't entirely disagree. I do rather like that movie.
I do too.
Yeah.
I actually like. I love Ang Lee's process.
You know, to tie it back to the Thin Red Line. Actually,
no.
No. Ang Lee kind of does the same thing in that movie that Terrence Malick does in this, where he cuts away to nature a lot. Like in this movie, just as like, you know, a bullet will fire and then we'll cut to a crocodile like biting a creature and killing it. In Hulk,
the Hulk will like destroy 3 tanks, and then we get like microscopic algae.
Yeah, and it cuts to like a lizard on a rock, and it goes.
Yeah, exactly. No, I actually think. What's the guy that plays the villains in like every single movie in the early 2000s? He was like the, not the general, but the guy who like wants a sample. Talbot.
Yeah,
that fucking guy is such a cartoony performance in Hulk.
He's so funny.
And I love the fact that he is like in like with like a neck brace, and his leg is all, his legs in like a crutch and everything, and he's just like still like trying to be this like evil bad guy villain.
I do very much like Hulk. I think the best.
Love
it too. I prefer the Avengers and Thor Ragnarok to Hulk 2003 as movies.
Oh, I mean, of course, but
but I actually think one of the best Hulk scenes is, and we'll get back to Thin Red Line in just a minute. I think in Thor Ragnarok, the moment where Hulk transforms back into Bruce Banner
after being Hulk for 2 years or whatever,
is my favorite like individual scene of Hulk. Because like he sees like the Black Widow video, and he's just he starts transforming. He's like, no, not Banner, no, and I just think it's a really good scene. They play a nice mix of the Lonely Man theme from the original Hulk show, mixed with some Ragnarok music. It's rather good.
I think that Mark Ruffalo was like a good casting choice if you wanted to be like, what is the most like non-threatening looking guy who can be like,
we're not a team, we're a time bomb.
We're not a team, we're a time bomb. Hey guys, being in a subway, a metal tube is kind of a bad idea for me.
Well, that's Edward Norton who says that.
Oh yeah, well he says like me in a floating boat.
You want to put me in a floating metal contraption?
No, but I think Eric Bana, I genuinely, he's a great actor.
Yes,
I love his performance in Hulk. I love the whole like kind of repressed trauma Banner, more so than the ashamed doctor Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Because, and you kind of get it in Edward Norton, although I don't have any comments about it. Fucking Edward Norton Hulk. That's such a forgettable movie, in my opinion.
It's the most forgettable movie.
But when he comes to like the Mark Ruffalo Banner versus Eric Bana Banner, Ruffalo Banner is like the ashamed doctor who created the monster he's become and tries to repress it. Whereas Eric Bana is like the tormented child who never quite got past his stuff, and he has such repressed rage that metaphorically and physically comes out as a monster. Well, and I love
Hulk 2003 is just like a Freud movie.
It is.
It's literally just a Freud movie.
It is a Freud movie, and I love it so much.
The last 10 minutes of that movie.
I fucking love it.
The last like 5-10 minutes of the movie are literally just a therapy session.
Yeah.
Like it's just Nick Nolte and Eric Bana in a room together talking about their differences and arguing.
Yeah.
And like he's like, you put this trauma on me. It's Eric Bana working through his like problems.
I mean, and the movie literally is a metaphor of like parental abuse, leaving a repressed.
Yeah, it's about childhood trauma.
Repressed childhood trauma.
Yes, great movie.
Fucking great movie.
Yeah.
You know what else is a pretty good movie?
Thin Red Line.
Thin Red Line.
Yes. They're taking this hill. They're taking this hill.
Did we mention this movie we're talking about is 3 hours long, and we're an hour and 5 minutes into this podcast?
They're taking this hill.
They're taking this hill. Well, they get through like the first
This is why
pass.
it's hard to describe this. This is why we keep going tangents, because like we can describe every other scene in this movie as they're taking this hill.
You know what the next thing I want to talk about is?
What?
The river scene.
That's the end of the movie.
I know it's the end of the movie.
Because this movie's just experiential. It's hard to discuss.
It very much is.
We can discuss the philosophy of it.
Which I feel like we have.
Yeah, which we have. But
hold on. let's just like get to the. So they took the hill.
Well, yeah, there's a little more I want to talk about with them taking the hill.
Okay, continue.
Just because like there's 3 actors who are only present in this part of the movie.
By the way, did we finish the point where Woody Harrelson dies?
Yeah, Woody Harrelson's dead as hell.
Yeah, he dies.
But Nolte's pissed because Elias Coast doesn't want to take the hill, so he storms up and he thinks the Japanese resistance has lessened, and so he fires Elias Codius. And he's like, we're going to do a little flanking maneuver, and then we're going to take the hill.
And all the way through this, they've been talking about water.
Yeah.
Getting the troops water.
Yes.
Because they haven't had, like, a good water supply.
Also, the crew of this movie. That's based on the crew of this movie. Like, we need water.
Crafty coolers.
And they're like, yeah, we can't get it up the hill.
We can't get it up the hill.
It apparently took 2 hours every day to get the crew up the hill.
Was it, like, for real?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
What a
to get the crew to the top of this hill to film.
Wait, is this for real?
This is for real. They had to like make base camps on the way up the hill because it took so long to get the crew up there.
Who's the fucking first AD who just like wakes up in the morning and goes
2 hour hill.
Call time 9 a.m. Shooting call 11:30.
Crew call 9 a.m. 2 hour travel time. 2 hour delayed call to travel the hill.
Fucking A.
But he goes like, we're gonna take the hill. And so he orders the full assault, but he does kind of relent and establish a little flanking team led by a suddenly appearing John Cusack.
Oh, yeah. Cusack's in this movie.
Who is good in this movie for the little bit he's given.
Like, very little bit.
Yes.
Like,
he shows up, he does his John Cusack thing where he's like, we're going to take the hill. And so he takes Jim Caviezel, who has rejoined the frontline troops. On Sean Penn's orders because enough men had died that they like need him back, and he's like, I want to be there with the men.
So he grabs his rifle.
Yeah. Jim Caviezel is kind of a babe in the woods in this movie. Like he kind of remains relatively optimistic for this first half of being like, I'm just here to fight a war, have a good time. I enjoyed my time with those peaceful people.
Sounds like a Tinder breath bio.
Yes.
I'm just here, having a good time, killing some people.
Yeah, killing some soldiers.
Yeah.
But John Cusack successfully takes the hill, and aren't we all so lucky for it? They successfully captured the hill.
Yeah.
They've done it. Dalty's really excited.
We're going to have this whole hill by nightfall.
Yeah, they give the men a week's leave.
God, we are really going through it.
Yeah, like what else is there to say? There's like an hour of them
because it's like another assault on an encampment. Storos gets relieved of command. The battalion gets sent to rest for a week. Yeah, I'm only 3 lines down.
There's literally like 30 minutes of this movie where they're in the exact same spot on the hill, just taking fire and shooting back.
Yeah,
and it's great, like capital G, great. But what do I say? They're there. They did it. Good performances.
It's at that point when I write down this movie is so fucking long, I stop paying attention.
Yeah, like it's hard to take notes.
Yeah. So after they take leave, which again, Storos is gone.
Yeah, they send Storos back to the U.S.
There's like a quick little bit between Nick Nolte and Elias, where he's talking about he's going to send him away.
Yeah.
He's like you're not tough for this. It's not good for you to be here. I'll recommend you for the Silver Star, and I'll throw in the Purple Heart with it. Yeah. He's like, why are you throwing in a Purple Heart? It's like, because you got scratches on your face and your hands.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like that whole run along now.
Yeah.
Like you're not built for this.
Yeah. Like you're not built for the brutality of this. Like this is something that changes men and changes, like war changes people.
Which is something.
And you have to be a specific type of person for war.
Talking about this has made me really want to rewatch The Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
It just deals with a lot of the similar things.
Yeah.
I think there's like one particular character who isn't in the Marine Corps at first, but he wants to sign up, and pretty much the first half of the first episode is just his parents trying to talk him out of it because his dad's a World War I vet.
And he's like,
says,
this is not what you think you're getting into.
Not what you think you're getting into. Like I saw men who came back but didn't really come back.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be you as well.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it's a 6-episode miniseries, and he comes back and he's like totally fucked up.
Yeah.
Like he's just
he saw things.
He saw a lot of things,
and that's basically what Staros kind of happens. Like he has a parting monologue where he gets on the plane and takes off. And he's like, I'm going, but part of me will always be with this battalion, and it's both it's a well written sequence because it's established like when he says, "Part of me will always be with this." It's that his men will remember him because they respected him as a leader.
Yeah.
But it's also he's leaving part of himself behind in this jungle.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very clever metaphor to establish.
And then after that, I think it's Jim Caviezel gets a letter from his wife who says she fell in love with the Air Navy officer.
Yeah, Jim Caviezel, who this whole time his whole like monologue thing in this movie is talking about how he's going to go back to Miranda Otto, who's waiting to marry him.
Yeah.
Oh no, they got married before he left.
Oh right, because she asked him for a divorce in the letter.
Yes, and that's kind of what keeps his chipper attitude this whole time, and why he was like, when he was with that the island natives, he was just like, yeah, this reminds me a lot of what home was like for me, and what I'm getting back to later. It's just this sense of peace that I have with these people on this island.
And it's during that rest period when he gets that letter from Miranda Otto. It's like, hey, I want a divorce because I want to marry this other guy.
Yes.
So, yeah, that happens. Cut to.
He then goes back to...
Yeah, they're back.
The people.
Like him and the company, they're all...
Well, first Whit goes back to the natives who we started the movie with. And when he gets there, it's no longer an idyllic paradise. Like, there's sickness there. None of them want to talk to him. They're afraid of him.
Totally forgot this happened.
And it's, it's the you can never go home again idea.
Yeah.
Like, the classic, like, John Ford movies, where it always deals with once you leave home, like, you can never come back. When you come back, you and home will both have changed, and it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
And so he comes back to what, to him, this whole movie has just been this idea of paradise. Mm-hmm. And he gets there, and it's just as shitty as the rest of the world.
Right.
Because there's, like, in a larger sense, they brought violence to this place. If not directly, then just by him being a part of violence. And that violence has transcended into this. Like, evil is a concept. Evil is an object that just transcends an action. And it enters the world in a permanent sense. That kind of like blew you away by the look of it.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty heavy.
It's kind of like Bruce Banner's dad, old 2003.
It's what a lot of Stephen King's books are about. Is how evil transcends just an action and stays with a place, and it changes a place. But this is obviously not based on a Stephen King book. There'd be a lot crazier things happening.
Then they go back into the jungle, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's disillusioned by this, and he kind of loses his attitude. He abandons the self that he was, and just kind of becomes like a soldier, fighting for another man's war.
Yeah.
So they go down the river. Well, he walks back to the camp, and he encounters an injured guy, like in the middle of like a brush. And he's like, "Hey, you want me to carry you back?" And the guy's like, "I'll just hang out here for a little bit." And he walks past him. That's the end of that.
I don't know why you remember things like that. I don't remember any of that.
But he gets back, and then they go down the river.
They're patrolling, like they're heading to another objective or something.
Yeah, they're given a new commander, Lieutenant Band, according to this.
This guy isn't a famous actor, right?
Yeah, this guy sucks.
I mean, Jesus, man.
Oh, not the actor, the character. I'm trying to figure out who plays him.
Oh, that's right, because he like commands a few guys to like go ahead, and all the troops are looking at him like, dude, that's a fucking awful idea.
Yeah,
like
he's played by Paul Gleason, who's number one most known for film is this. So yeah, not someone of particular note.
Yeah,
but
they're patrolling the river, and
I don't know what happens to Nolte around this point. I don't think we see him.
Nolte kind of disappears. I'm pretty sure
a lot of people disappear around this point because we're now just like the movie kind of refocuses itself on Caviezel and Adrian Brody.
Yeah,
who's playing Fife, even though he doesn't have any lines. It kind of refocuses back on them.
Yeah,
Nolte kind of his send off is basically that he gets his glory of taking the hill, but at what cost, like what personal and larger cost, like
Right.
his most trusted soldier he fired.
Well,
he,
the men don't have reverence for him. They
Yeah.
have reverence for
Staros. They have reverence for the guy who we had to get rid of.
He was like looking out for him, telling him, because they even say that when they're like taking the rest, is that, hey, like, Sarge, thanks for trying to look out for us by doing the flanking maneuver thing.
And it's like at the end of the day, Nolte just kind of gets confronted by this movie's themes and philosophy of like, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
You got your glory, but no one is holding it for you.
Right.
And that's what we leave Nolte with, is kind of just a disappointed shell of a man whose all he wanted was glory in war, and that's the one thing he can never achieve.
Yeah.
All Staros ever wanted was to keep his men safe, and he got fired for it. It's all just people getting confronted with the pointlessness of all this, the futility of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
As this wit that he can no longer go home.
So Jim Caviezel and Adrian Brody are in the river with their battalion.
They're sent to go scout ahead.
And there's a lot of bombardment happening around them.
Yeah.
And
so they scout ahead, and what do they see? The trees start moving. They see a whole ass battalion of Japanese soldiers coming towards them.
Well, hold on. They're in the river with their battalion, and there's a lot of bombardment.
Yeah.
And the commanding officer wants to send a few guys to go scout.
And they send them
that's
forward.
Adrian Brody, Fife, and then Jim Caviezel, Wit, and then one other guy.
And the third dude
who
you're
gives
like,
a fuck about.
We were like, oh yeah, a third guy with no name. Oh, that's not gonna go over.
Yeah, exactly. He's surely gonna survive after this, right? So the three go out, and as they're like scouting out, that's when they see like, the trees moving, and then all the Japanese soldiers with like tree brush camouflage around them, and they're all coming out, and it truly like mortifying scene, because it's like, oh fuck. And they start
the third guy doesn't make it.
They start running away to try to warn the battalion, but the Japanese soldiers see them, so they start firing. One guy gets hit, and he's slowly bleeding out, again with the narrative that no one really dies quickly in this movie. Everybody gets shot and they bleed out and die. Which I think is an interesting reoccurring thing. And so they're holed up, and so then Caviezel tells Brody, it's like, hey, like, you go run back to the battalion and warn them all, keep them preoccupied, doing the sacrificial thing. And this kind of goes with the change in personality that you described, which is he's now just become a soldier.
Yeah, and he doesn't have anything to live for.
He doesn't have anything to live for. And so
war has truly corrupted him.
So he's running, being chased by all these Japanese soldiers. Adrian Brody runs back to his troops. And he's like, we all got to get out of here. Like, they're all coming. And then meanwhile, he runs into an open field surrounded by Japanese soldiers.
And they ask him to surrender. And he raises his gun and gets shot.
And dies.
And that's the end of Jim Caviezel in this movie.
Yeah.
But they get back, and
George Clooney is in this.
Yes. You know what scene we didn't talk about?
What did we not talk about?
After they've taken the hill, they take that little village near it.
Oh, right.
And it plays the iconic bit of music from this movie. This movie is scored by Hans Zimmer.
Yes.
Who wrote like thousands of minutes of music, not thousands, but a lot of music for this movie that doesn't get used.
Right.
But a lot of the music from this movie, especially that leftover stuff, gets used as trailer music and like temp music in movies. I think this is one of the most temped movies ever. And then people take the score from this and put it in other movies until they have an actual score.
Right.
But it's like, it's the same bit of music that plays in the X-Men Days of Future Past trailer, which I just remember this. It's like when they're taking the hill. They take this village.
Yeah.
And the village, I think it's the most successful scene of the movie. In that they're like storming this village, and you're just seeing like Japanese guys like screaming as they light them on fire with flamethrowers. Yeah. And everyone's just looking around. It just really drives home how miserable war is.
And it's just like mad pandemonium.
Yeah, not even like a terrifying thing.
It's not even like a front of one side and one side coming together. It's that they get into this camp and they just start slaughtering people.
And it's just kind of, I think this movie more than most others I've seen really nails the misery of war.
Yeah.
Like movies like Apocalypse Now capture the horror of it, but this is just the misery.
Yeah. And you see that misery most personified within the enemy.
Yes.
Because they're all like trying to surrender. And they're not really being given quarter.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But anyway,
the music under that is very like dauntingly terrifying.
Yes.
Because it's all happening. Because it's like, it's all very like light music.
Yeah.
But like, it's like sad music, but not heavy or orchestrated sad music.
And around that part, there is one part that I like where Zimmer plays almost a lower key rendition of a triumphant theme. Like, it's something that would play over like a victory, but you're just watching what seems like a loss, like a moral loss for a victory, and it's just a very subversive way of using that music to make a point.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the end of the movie.
Caviezel dies.
Yeah, they recover his body. They get a new commander, George Clooney. He has one shot in which he monologues. He's like, about, hey, I run a tight ship as my command. And then we're like, cool, George.
Great.
And then next scene, they're at a beach, and Sean Penn gets on the boat, and they leave the island.
And that's the end of the movie. That's a thin red line.
Yeah.
Why is it called the Thin Red Line? Besides the fact that it's probably the name of the novel.
It's based on a line from a Rudyard Kipling poem. That I cannot find.
Sounds like a Wikipedia thing you found out.
Yes. It's a poem called Tommy from 1890. And the Thin Red Line is kind of, I don't know. I can't find specifically what. Oh, here it is. In the poem, he calls British foot soldiers the Thin Red Line of heroes because they wore red around the time.
Yeah, the redcoats.
And so it's like, the Thin Red Line is just a line of soldiers.
Can I share?
And it's also kind of, a thin red line of blood.
Yeah. Can I share a fascinating World War II Japanese soldier story?
Yes.
To finish this off. So so when all like the Japanese soldiers were like stationed out on these islands, they were all given orders to like, pretty vaguely in some sense, like kill as many soldiers as you can before you die.
Yeah.
Like one of the emperor once made like, or commanding officers would often say like, for every one of us who dies, 10 Americans must be killed or something like that. And it bred like this culture of like kamikazes and suicide, booby traps and all that stuff. The knives at the end, bayoneting and all that stuff. But what's most fascinating about culture-wise of the Japanese front of the war is how borderline religious war it was.
Yeah.
Was how far and willing to go, because like the emperor was kind of a deity in that time. And so with that mindset now that groundwork laid to the audience, there was a soldier who was stationed on an island in the Pacific with like troops and all that. But as they were getting like bombarded, and like they were one of the islands that didn't really have much attacks from like foot soldiers, but it was just getting bombarded by Navy troops and just being like demoralized. And as like the U.S. was taking more of the Japanese territory and coming closer to the mainland, they would bring in any soldiers of islands that weren't being taken to more fortified, closer islands and tactical positions, except for the soldier. Because the soldier was so like, how's the best way to put it? Like he was so like die hard, willing to just like cause as much trouble. Because that was another thing too with like their war, was like it was better to just be hiding and like cause more sabotage and cause more pandemonium than to just a flat out frontal assault like what the U.S. would do. And so he spent years on this island attacking like local natives, any troops that were there, just causing a bunch of issues. And he stayed there for the full duration of the war.
And then after the war, I presume.
And after the war, like when they, like relatives of his, like when the empire toppled, like relatives of his told like authorities like, hey, like we still have like
a guy
out there and he probably doesn't know the war's over. So they sent like searching parties to find this guy. But this guy was so
locked in
that he thought it was American propaganda. Like they would like be having megaphones and be like, hey, like private so-and-so, like the war's over. Like, you can come out. And he's like, no, I don't believe it. This is like American. Like, this is a real story that happened. To the point where they were like air raiding and flying in like leaflets to be like, Private so-and-so, if you see this, the war is over. Like, come out of hiding and stop killing people. And it went on until like the 60s, because eventually I believe what happened was a journalist went out looking for this guy on an island. And I think it was an American journalist, or maybe it was a Japanese journalist. I'm probably getting a lot of small details wrong, but the overarching story is true, guys. Went out searching and he found him. And rather than killing him, like, he kind of like stuck around with him. And so these two guys are sticking around on this island, and he's trying to just like fill his head with information of what's going on. He's like, so what's happening now? It's like, well, the war is over. He's like, all right. And we have a different industry. It's no longer the empire anymore. There's no emperor. Like, we have all this stuff. And eventually he talks him into coming back to the mainland. And he comes to the mainland and sees what post-empire Japan is like and hates it. And he eventually finds out, like, okay, so the war really is over, but I hate what Japan has become from this. And then he just moves back to the island and lived there. This is a real fucking thing that happened, guys. And it lasted like 20 years after the war had ended. I probably not, but like, it was a while ago. Yeah. But like, I believe it was up until the 60s, if I recall, that this guy still thought like the war was going on. He stayed out there, and he like lived like in the wilderness, like on his own. Yeah, just like foraging and all camping and all that stuff for over 20 years. Yeah, and it's such like it's a very looked at case study of like this mindset that many of the soldiers and troops had.
Were indoctrinated
into in the Japanese Empire, and what we were kind of up against. It's a relic of that mindset.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I just think it's so cool.
That's very interesting. So, anyway, Thin Red Line comes out.
Oh, yeah.
It comes out. It makes $98 million. Not around double its box office. A solid hit.
They make back what they,
It has no impact for John Travolta. He's not in that much of it.
Of course not.
It's just another example of how he's top of his game at this point.
It impacts Terrence Malick, though, I imagine.
Yes, impacts Terrence Malick. He pretty much he gets blank check status after this, and he more or less can make whatever he wants. His next movie is The New World, which is the live-action Pocahontas movie. Which is funny because Christian Bale is in that, but he's also in the animated Pocahontas.
Yeah.
But gets extremely solid reviews. Gene Siskel calls it one of the best war movies he's ever seen. Martin Scorsese ranks this as his number 2 best movie of the 90s.
What's number 1?
It's a movie that actually didn't really come out in the 90s, so this is technically his number 1. I found it earlier, but I cannot find the list now. But it gets nominated for 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Adapted Screenplay.
Yeah.
Best Cinematography, Editing, Score, and Sound. Does not win any of them because it is the Saving Private Ryan Shakespeare in Love year.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the technical awards go to Saving Private Ryan, which is arguably a greater technical accomplishment than this. So I think they are very comparable in just how like impressively made they are.
Yeah.
This movie's very well shot, and the action is very well staged, and the effects are very impressive.
But Saving Private Ryan is better.
Saving Private Ryan, yes, it's a little more tight,
and just bigger scope, bigger scale. Yeah.
But it gets those 7 nominations. It really marks like Malick's back.
It would be disappointing if this movie did win more technical awards.
Yeah.
I'd almost rather it had been nominated for a lot of awards and not win any than if it was nominated and it won like fucking best special effects or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that would have been almost a damnation of the movie, because you're not supposed to be focusing on the big and wow of the battle sequences.
Yes. So Martin Scorsese's number 1 of the 90s is a movie called The Horse Thief. It's a Chinese film. It actually came out in 1986, but it was not released in America until later in the early 90s.
Watch out, Martin Scorsese. Jeff Sweeney's got beef.
Martin, you beat. You burnt. But no, this movie is a major success. It does great things. A lot of Oscars. Still has a pretty solid cultural relevance nowadays. Got the Criterion Collection, special special edition. That's what I got. And that's the Thin Red Line. Do you have any last-minute takes on the Thin Red Line? Not a lot of Travolta content for us to discuss.
Not a lot of Travolta content. Just overall thoughts on the movie. It's probably not something I'd watch again, just because. I thought it was.
It's long and miserable.
It's long and miserable. It's like a movie you'd watch with your grandfather once on a Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
That you would pause in the middle of it to like make dinner, eat, and then you would watch the rest of it, and he would fall asleep. That exact example.
Yeah.
That's the type of the movie this is.
This is a movie I would definitely... I mean, I bought the Blu-ray. I'd definitely watch it again. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was rather astounding. But it is definitely a trying experience.
It is. You have to be in the effortful mood.
You have to like ready to commit to watch this movie.
Yeah.
It's something that demands your attention.
I was not in that mood when I watched this movie.
Yeah.
Hence me blanking out on a lot of sequences.
The details.
So,
except for mustache in all caps on your...
Yeah, I wrote down mustache
in all caps. So yeah, that's basically more or less the last of my thoughts on the Thin Red Line.
Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah, let me...
I need you to pull out the fucking outro script every time now.
I always forget to do it.
What happened, Jeff? You used to be like so...
Well, I used to type up all my notes for these movies.
You used to be so like... segue ease into it, like be like, all right folks, that's the Thin Red Line, that's our final thoughts, and you can catch us on and now you gotta
because I used to type all my notes up, but now I just read them off my book.
Our audience deserves better.
They do. Thank you all for listening to the Thin Red Line. Make sure to tune next week for our episode on a civil action.
Will we be civil about a civil action?
No.
Great.
It's not. It's an uncivil uncivil podcast for civil action.
I'm gonna sue this movie.
You're gonna sue this movie?
I'm gonna sue this movie.
Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. If you enjoy the show, please remember we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. We've been getting a lot of traction on our Google Podcasts recently, so thank you to everyone who's been listening on that. You can find us at Travolting Pod on Twitter or Instagram for updates and fun stuff. Pop to our Reddit, r/Travolting. Email any comments or questions to travoltingpodcast@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter at Jeff W. Sweeney.
Find me on Instagram at Stuart Elmore 95.
And as always, special thanks to Rebecca Johnson for our graphic design and Michael Van Bodegum Smith for the theme music that's now taking you out. See you folks next week.
Fuck White Castle. Bye.